In this tutorial, I'm going to be using 7 fabrics, and wait until you see the incredible quilt that they create. I'll be showing you step by step the clever technique that will turn these bold fabrics into a stunning quilt design. And make sure you stay to the end, because this pattern looks just as good as a table runner, and we'll show you all of the different patterns that we've created. So let's get started. First, we're going to lay out the fabrics and arrange them in the colour order I want for this design. Now, your colour combination is completely up to you. However, the order in which you place them will become clearer once I have completed the blocks. So I'll be giving you more info at the end of the video so that you can see how your fabric choices made here will impact the look of the final quilt blocks. So it might be worth watching the whole video before you lay out your fabrics. Now, once I have them in the right order, I'm going to number them, as I will need to know which is which for the next step. Now, you could also take a photo with your phone or tablet so that you can refer back to it if needed. Now, bear in mind that for this quilt pattern to work, you will need to have 42 inches of available fabric. Any less and you will end up needing more fabric, and you will need to cut and sew more strips. Now I'm going to start with fabric 1, and I'll lay it out on my mat, and I'll go ahead and trim off the edge in order to straighten it up. Then I'm going to flip my fabric around so that it is in the right orientation for me to cut, as I want to start cutting some strips from this fabric. And we want the strips to be cut at 1.5 inches by the width of fabric. So I'll line up my ruler on the 1.5 inch mark and cut, and I'll continue doing this until I have 10 strips. And I'll just attach the number to the pile of strips, just so it is easy to keep track of them as I go. For fabric 2, I'm going to be cutting these at 2.5 inches by the width of fabric, and I'm going to need 10 of them as well. For fabric 3, I'm going to cut 10 of these at 1.5 inches, and I'll keep alternating like this for the remaining strips. So in other words, once cut, I will have 10 strips of each of these fabrics. And they are cut in alternating sizes, and you can see the sizes on the screen here. Now, we all know that quilting is about learning new techniques, and if you love learning as much as I do, you'll love Skillshare, the sponsor of this video. Now, Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes on just about everything from quilting and sewing to gardening, photography, crochet, knitting, and even making junk journals, something that I really enjoy doing. So you can improve your creative skills in every area. Now, I've been focusing on gardening classes because I've just started planting flowers in my front garden. Now, I have a bit of experience planting vegetables, but not much when it comes to growing flowers. So the Gardening for Beginners course by Mark Shorter has been invaluable, as he focuses mainly on the flowers that I'm trying to grow. And this is what I want, and this is what I've got. So I've got a bit of a way to go. I'm also looking at the sewing videos. I'm wanting to start making my own clothes again, and I've added this one to my list of saves to watch later, as I have a couple of tops that I can't bear to part with, and they've seen better days, and I'd really like to copy them. So if you're ready to level up your creative skills, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today. And now let's get back to the tutorial. Now I'm going to take one strip of each of these fabrics, and I'll set the others aside for the moment while I work with these strips. And I'm going to start by cutting the selvage of each of these strips. You only need to trim one edge, so don't worry about the other end. And to speed up the process, I did line up multiple fabrics before cutting these selvages off. Now I'm going to lay them out in the original order I decided on in the first step, and that is why it's a good idea to number your fabrics so you can easily keep track of the correct order that they need to be in. You'll also notice that I have lined up the edges that we cut in the previous step. And now I'm just going to sew all of these strips together with a 1/4 inch seam. I like to pin and sew them together in lots of 2, and then sew all of them together to form the strip set, and I'll do that with all of the strips that I have here. So I finished sewing my strip sets together, and I have 10 strip sets, and note that the width of these strip sets should be 10.5 inches. If they're slightly off 10.5, then that's okay, but if you are too far out, you may want to unpick and resew. It really will make it easier in the next steps if your strip set is the right measurement. And before I go on, I'll just show you how I press these strips, and I ended up pressing them all to one side. We did try to figure out if there was a better way of pressing the seams for this quilt pattern, because when it comes to sewing the final blocks together, the seams don't always nest. Perhaps pressing the seams open might help, so it might be worth a try. Now I'm going to take one of these strip sets and lay it out on my mat and line up my ruler so that I can trim off the scrappy edges in order to neaten it up. Then I'm going to flip this around to get it into the right position, and I'm going to line up my ruler on the 10.5 inch mark and cut. And I'm going to continue like this all the way down the strip set, and I'm going to do this with all of my strip sets. Each strip set will give you 4 blocks. Now remember that you need at least 42 inches of available fabric for this to work. Any less and you will end up with only 3 blocks, which is what happened to us at the start. You can see that fabric 1 just wasn't long enough, so we had to cut and sew a whole new strip set to get that extra piece that we needed. So now I have all of my pieces cut, and I have 40 of them in total. So I'm going to take 4 of them and lay them out so they're all running in the same direction. So fabric 1 is at the bottom of all these blocks. And now what I'm going to do is turn the bottom 2 blocks like so. So I now have fabric 1 running along the sides. So you can just think of this as forming a house with 2 sides and a roof. Now I'm going to take this piece and bring it up over the top of this one, and I'll do the same with this other one. And then I'll go ahead and I'm going to sew around the edge of each block with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to repeat that process with all of the rest of these pieces. So I have them all sewn, and I did give them all a press as it helps to flatten out any bubbling that might occur. We do have bias edges to deal with, and they can bubble along the edges. Next I'm going to take one of these pieces and I'm going to place it on my rotating mat. Now if you don't have one of these, then you can just use your regular mat and spin it around as needed. I'm going to take my ruler and line it up along the diagonal and cut. Then I'll spin my mat around and do the same on the other side, lining it up nicely and then cutting. Now this results in 4 blocks. And now I'm going to repeat that with all of these other pieces. You can see that I have them all cut now, and I have 80 of these blocks in total. And since there are 4 different blocks, I have separated them out into 4 different piles, so there are 20 of each block. Now they do look very similar, so it can get a little confusing, so separating them out like this will definitely help. Now I want to show you how I've pressed these, and I ended up pressing them all towards the long seam. Again, we did try to figure out how to press these seams so they would nest, but couldn't come up with something that would work in the time we had. But if you continue to watch, you'll see what we ended up doing to help make at least some of them nest. Now we are ready to sew these together, and essentially what we're going to be doing is creating 2 different blocks. Now I'm going to work with these 2 piles first, so these are the ones that have the same fabric running along the long strip. So I'm going to take 2 squares from the top pile and place the first one so that the small point here faces towards the center, and then I'll place the other one here so that again the small piece faces the center. Then I'll take 2 squares from the second pile and place them in the remaining 2 spaces. Once you have them in place, you will need to ensure that the fabric at each end of these joins here match, and that forms our first block. Now I'm just going to move these out of the way and bring these ones over, and you can see that they have the same patterned fabric through the middle. And again I'm going to take 2 from the top pile and 2 from the bottom. And I'll just move this over a little bit, and again what I'm going to do is place these 2 like so, and then the other 2 pieces to form the block. And again you can see that these pieces all match up. So this is block 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew these into larger blocks, so I'll take this piece and sew it onto the other one with the 1/4 inch seam, and I'll do the same with this one. And once I've sewn those 2 together, I'll pop this piece over and sew along here to complete the block. And I'll do the same with this other block, and then I'm going to continue like that until I have all of the blocks formed. Now I just want to show you a quick tip for sewing these that saved us a lot of heartache by helping to nest these seams. So you can see that my pieces here are ready to sew, but the seams run in the same direction. So what we ended up doing is pressing the seams for the block that is on top in the other direction. And now you can see how the seams nest. This saved us a ton of time trying to get everything to line up. So now I will sew along the edge and then trim these bits off later. And now that I have all of my blocks formed, I'm going to lay them out, and you can see how the blocks alternate all the way down the quilt. And I'm going to sew them together in rows first of all, so I'll start at the bottom and complete the row and then repeat that all the way up the quilt. Now that I have my rows sewn, I'm going to go ahead and sew them all together to form the quilt top, and I usually do this in lots of 2 as I find it more manageable that way. And there we have it, our quilt top is done. Now I think it turned out great. And as I promised, I want to show you the table runners that we made using this pattern. So this is the first one, and if you're a regular watcher of our videos, you may recognise the fabric from a previous quilt project. I had some leftovers that I thought would work beautifully in this table runner. And this one here I think is my favourite. The yellow just makes everything pop. Now for the mauve one, I feel that the borders of the frames are a tad too dark. I should have used a more subtle purple or green. I haven't finished this one as yet. Now I'm going to take a bit of a bow here, as not only did we make the table runners, but we quilted 2 of them using my embroidery machine. Now we've tried quilting with an embroidery machine once a few years ago, but gave up after the first attempt as hooping in regular hoops wasn't easy. We bought a magnetic frame and it's made all the difference. So now we're wanting to quilt everything, but we'll stick with table runners until we really get the hang of it. Also, as promised, here is a visual of how the order of the strips affects the outcome of the pattern. Now you can pause the screen here or head on over to our website to view it there. As always, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.